If you forget these 5 words, your own name, the current year where you are, what you're doing, or who you're with, you need to see a doctor immediately. Because it's not just forgetfulness, it's your brain's emergency flare. And most people miss it until it's too late, until the fog has settled so thick around their thoughts that even memories start to feel like lies. And it all begins with a slip, a hesitation, the pause before a familiar word that refuses to come. And you brush it off as stress or fatigue, but inside your brain, something far more serious is unfolding. Neuronal misfires, shrinking synapses, and chemical confusion. And if you ignore this early whisper, it will grow louder until it becomes the only voice you hear, drowning out the names, the dates, the plans, and then the people, the faces, even yourself. The truth no one dares say is that memory loss often doesn't start with forgetting the past. It begins by forgetting the present piece by piece, word by word, and those 5 words are your canary in the coal mine. Because your name isn't just a label, it's your anchor. And when you forget it, even briefly, your sense of self begins to drift. And suddenly you don't just lose a word, you lose identity, purpose, history. The current year isn't trivia, it's orientation. Your mind's way of locating itself in time. And when you fumble that your thoughts become unmoored, timelines collapse, and you can no longer tell what's recent and what's old, what's today, and what was 10 years ago. Where you are seems simple until it's not, until you're standing in a familiar room, and it feels foreign until your home becomes a puzzle, your neighborhood a mystery, and you feel panic rising in your chest because nothing looks quite right anymore. What you're doing when that disappears, you lose the thread of life itself, the ability to follow a task, to stay with a thought from start to finish, and then the routines you've trusted for decades start falling apart like brittle leaves, and everything feels half done, half thought, half lived. And who you're with when that slips, you've entered the darkest part of memory. Decay, the place where love goes to die, where family becomes strangers, and every conversation feels like an interrogation. If you forget any of these 5, it's not just time to worry, it's time to act, because behind that forgetting is something deeper. Inflammation, protein buildup, the slow invasion of neurodegenerative forces that don't knock, they seep, they crawl, they take root in silence. And most people don't notice until it's too late, because the signs are subtle, disguised as aging, dismissed as just getting older. But here's the shocking truth. It's not normal to forget these things. It's not harmless. It's not just life. It's a warning. Your brain begging for oxygen, nutrients, stimulation, repair. You think memory loss is about age, but it's about lifestyle inflammation, blood flow, sleep, quality micronutrient deficiencies, chronic stress, unprocessed trauma. The brain isn't failing because it's old. It's failing because it's being ignored, starved, suffocated in routine, in loneliness, in silence. And these 5 words are the tip of the iceberg, the final layer your mind protects before deeper collapse begins. Because beneath forgetting your name is forgetting your story. Beneath forgetting the year is forgetting your goals. Beneath forgetting where you are is losing the sense of home. Beneath forgetting what you're doing is losing purpose. And beneath forgetting who you're with is the shattering isolation of being alive without connection. So what do? You disrupt the decay. You speak, move, feel, eat, question, cry, learn, connect. You bring your brain back to life, not with pills, but with presence. Not with fear, but with fierce love for your mind, for your memories, for the life you're still living. And if these 5 words are slipping, then this is your moment to fight. Not later, not when it gets worse, but now, while you still know enough to care, to act, to reverse what still can be reversed. Because if you forget these 5 words, your brain is not just confused, it's calling out. Will you answer? Because the truth is, memory doesn't vanish all at once. It frays like an old rope, unraveling one thread at a time. And by the time you realize what's slipping, years of damage may already be done. And those 5 forgotten words are your final signal, the last alert before deeper systems start shutting down. And it begins so subtly that even your closest family may miss it, or worse, they may explain it away. You're just tired, they'll say, or we all forget things, or it's normal at your age. But what they don't realize is that normal forgetfulness doesn't involve forgetting where you are while standing in your kitchen, or why you picked up the phone 5 seconds ago, or who the person beside you is at a family gathering. And when those moments happen, something ancient inside you panics, even if you don't show it, because deep down your mind knows what's coming and it's terrified. And yet here's the hidden horror. So many people don't seek help, not because they don't care, but because they're ashamed, because they don't want to make a fuss, because they believe forgetting is a private humiliation to be hidden, not a medical signal to be answered. And that shame, that silence is exactly what lets the damage deepen. What you need to know is this: if you act early, the brain can fight back. Your hippocampus, the part responsible for forming new memories, can regrow neural connections even in your 70s, even in your 80s, even after setbacks. But not if you keep pretending, not if you keep brushing it off, because the longer you wait, the more your brain accepts decay as the new normal. You forget where you are, and the next time it lasts longer. You forget the current year, and suddenly your conversations feel foggy. You forget what you're doing mid-sentence, and you begin to retreat socially, afraid someone might notice. And when you forget who someone is, someone you love, you lose not only them, but a part of yourself that existed only in your connection to them. Because memory is not a filing cabinet. It's a web. One snapped thread weakens everything. And when those 5 words are gone, you're not just disoriented. You're disconnected from time, from space, from self, from love. That's why every second matters. You must treat your brain like you treat your heart in the middle of a heart attack, with urgency, with action, with zero hesitation. Because while most people think heart attacks are sudden and brain failure is slow, the truth is they're both progressive and they're both preventable until they're not. And here's the shocking thing: no one tells you if your brain is showing signs of losing those 5 words. There are likely dozens of underlying causes quietly working together against you: chronic inflammation, poor sleep hygiene, long-term medication, side effects, insulin resistance, dehydration, lack of oxygen-rich movement, social isolation, low cognitive stimulation, untreated hearing loss, even dental infections that lead to systemic inflammation reaching the brain. And every one of those can be adjusted, interrupted, healed. But only if you're brave enough to notice the signs and bold enough to not dismiss them. Because the second you start forgetting what you're doing or where you are, your mind is waving a red flag, not a white one. It hasn't given up. It's asking you to show up. And when you show up with purpose, with curiosity, with strategy, your brain doesn't just stabilize, it starts to rebuild. But you have to feed it, not just with food, but with movement, story, surprise, discomfort, love, challenge. You have to leave the comfort of autopilot behind, because autopilot is where memory goes to die. If you're doing the same things, thinking the same thoughts, talking to the same people, walking the same paths, you are building the perfect soil for memory loss to take root. You must disturb the routine. You must agitate the system. You must light up new neural trails like lighting candles in a forgotten hallway. Because those 5 words you're afraid of losing, they're not random. They are the 5 pillars of presence. And when even one of them slips, your ability to be here now starts to crumble. That's why the warning is so severe, and the action must be so immediate. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now, before the forgetting grows teeth. And still, most people won't act, not because they don't care, but because they've been slowly trained to believe that slipping memory is a quiet, private tragedy, something to be borne, not battled. But that belief is a lie, one that kills more slowly than disease and far more quietly. Because when you stop treating memory loss like the medical crisis it is, you also stop protecting the most sacred thing you have, the thread of who you are. And if you forget your name even once and laugh it off, you've already made a trade your story for silence, your alarm for avoidance. And that trade is what accelerates the decay, because the brain listens always, and when it hears you say, "It's nothing," it stops trying to protect the something that is dying inside you. And the year, do you know what it means when your brain forgets the current year? It means the circuits responsible for orienting you in time have been compromised, that your ability to connect moments into meaning is slipping, and soon you'll not only forget what day it is, you'll forget whether the things you remember happened yesterday, last month, or a lifetime ago. And when time itself becomes muddy, your choices lose urgency, and your days begin to drift together like clouds with no anchor. And when you forget where you are, it's not just confusion, it's dislocation. the neurological equivalent of an earthquake. Because your spatial awareness is mapped across multiple regions of your brain. And when that map starts breaking, you don't just forget the room, you forget how you fit inside it, and that moment of being lost in a place you once knew is more than frightening. It's predictive a signal that parts of your memory web are shutting down, not because they're old, but because they've been unused, unstimulated, or inflamed by years of silent damage. And forgetting what you're doing, that is the collapse of the now, the loss of intention, the inability to hold a task from birth to completion, and it affects everything your safety. When cooking your ability to drive your ability to follow a conversation, your confidence in public, your belief in your own competence. And when that belief goes, it takes your will to try with it. And that surrender is where the deepest decay begins, not from biology, but from withdrawal. And when you forget who you're with, even if only for a moment, you are standing at the edge of the loneliest cliff. Because memory isn't just about facts, it's about connection. And the human face is the first mirror your brain ever learned to recognize. And when those faces blur, love blurs with them. And that blurring isn't just tragic, it's deadly, because people begin to disappear from your world while still standing next to you. And that disconnection causes the kind of isolation that accelerates cognitive decline more than almost any other factor. So if any of these slips have happened to you, don't minimize them. Investigate them. Don't hide them. Speak them. Don't wait for someone else to notice, act now, because these aren't coincidences. They're coordinates pointing to something deeper. Maybe vascular inflammation, maybe insulin resistance, maybe toxic protein, buildup, maybe a lifetime of undersleeping, undermoving, undercaring for the engine that carries your soul. And all of that can still be changed, but not if you pretend this is just a phase. Not if you laugh off forgetting your own name. Not if you normalize losing time and place. And people. You must become the fiercest advocate your mind has ever known. You must rebuild rituals that awaken memory. You must stop eating in ways that poison cognition. Stop spending hours in stillness with nothing but distraction. Stop shrinking your world out of fear, because every day you stay passive, your mind gets the message you've given up and it begins to dismantle one detail at a time. But the inverse is also true every day. You show up, speak up, move differently, engage deeper, reflect more. The brain responds, it rewires, it reclaims, it fights back. Not all at once and not perfectly, but enough to stop the spiral, enough to hold the line, enough to recover fragments you thought were lost. Because these 5 words, your name, the year, the place, your task, your connection, they're not trivia, they're thresholds. And the moment you forget even one of them, your brain is begging you to cross back through, to return, to repair, to remember. And if you are still here, still holding on to the thread of this truth, then your brain is not done. It is waiting, hoping you will finally stop treating memory like a passive reflection and start treating it like the living force that it is, because memory is not static, not fixed, not lost forever unless you let it be. And the moment you forget your name, the moment you ask what year it is, the moment you look around your home and it feels unfamiliar, those are not failures. They are flare signals, the mind's cry for oxygen movement renewal, and you must respond like your life depends on it. Because it does, because memory is not a luxury. It's the spine of your identity, the blueprint of every relationship you've built, every lesson you've learned, every joy you've earned. And if you lose it, you do not become empty, you become adrift, a soul floating without anchors. And that's when life becomes survival, not meaning. And that shift is when people begin to fade from themselves, slowly, silently, unnoticed, and what's worse, accepted. And the systems that could have been healed are left to die, not because healing was impossible, but because urgency was absent. And it's this absence, the absence of alarm, of boldness, of insistence, that leads to the point of no return. And if you've forgotten even one of those 5 words, you are not broken. You are timely in the exact window where change is still possible, still powerful, still worth everything. So you start with the simplest act of rebellion. You remember on purpose. You repeat the names of the people you love aloud every morning. You say the current year before you start the day. You name the place you are standing. You whisper the task you are doing as you do it. You look into the eyes of the person with you and say, I know you, I see you, I remember you. Because every one of those acts sends a ripple back through the mind, reactivating dormant trails, strengthening weak pathways, telling the brain this matters, hold this, don't let go. And then you build from there, you walk a different route. Eat something with real color and nutrients. Sleep with true darkness and silence. Learn the name of a new neighbor, read aloud to yourself. Write letters by hand, dance in your living room without apology. Challenge your memory not to catch failure, but to grow strength. Because when you stretch the brain even gently, it responds like a muscle waking after sleep, and the neurons fire faster. The blood flows stronger and the fog lifts not all at once, but enough to remember who you were before you began fading. And yes, maybe you'll forget again, but now you know the road back. Now you know the signal. Now you know that the 5 words you fear forgetting are not the end. They are the door. The door you must keep walking through day after day. Voice steady, eyes open. Mind alive. Because if you forget your name, you must say it louder the next time. If you forget the year, you must draw it on paper and carry it in your pocket. If you forget where you are, you must touch the ground and describe it. If you forget what you're doing, you must narrate your own actions until they hold. If you forget who you're with, you must hold their hand and say their name over and over until it stays. And in that process, you are not just remembering. You are reclaiming your mind, refusing to go quietly, refusing to dissolve, refusing to accept that aging equals disappearance. Because it doesn't, it equals transformation. And transformation means you still have power, still have reach, still have fire. And this is the fire, the knowing that even if your memory falters, your will must not, your voice must not, your presence must not, because the brain listens to all of it, responds to all of it. And what you do today will determine who you still get to be tomorrow. So if you forget these 5 words, see a doctor, but before you do, see yourself fully, honestly, bravely, because that act alone may be what brings the next memory home.